Now, our next guest is a academic who works for Tailrisk economics. He's got a wide and extensive background in farming, but really in farming and finance, but also in data collection, basically, and its analysis. He's worked for a series of august national and international organisations. Ian Harrison. He's got a BCA Honours from Victoria University. He's got a Master of Public Policy from Johns Hopkins University, one of the top universities in the United States. He's worked with the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, the World Bank International Monetary Fund, and the Bank for International Settlements, and he joins us now. Ian, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you.
Tell a little bit about yourself first before we get into your paper that you've written and why you were tempted to write it, in actual fact. You got a BCA Honours from Victoria. What generation was that, mate?
Oh, way back, mate. I started there in 1970, and then I went to the Reserve Bank and then to the World Bank as more on the political side of things. And then I did my Masters at Johns Hopkins, came back, spent time in the Reserve Bank, little stints elsewhere, and then I went consulting.
So what sort of things did you do in the Reserve Bank and the World Bank?
Economics.
Right.
Economics.
Yeah. So when you say economics...
I'm not a doctor, but I'm not a doctor, medical doctor, but I'm an economist.
Right. So you'd look at Reserve Bank offering policy advice, for example, to the government of the day, seeing how policies are working or not working, that sort of stuff.
That sort of stuff, yeah. So, and I've written very broadly through my Tailrisk brand on a lot of issues, particularly climate change. I wrote a lot on COVID. So if you go to my website, tailrisk.co.nz, you'll see about 40 or 50 papers, quite extensive. So what I'm, if you like, a fact checker. So I look at the document and then look at all the references, check references.
Right, and then you basically see whether the narrative that is being promoted as part of whatever the orthodoxy might be stands up to that scrutiny or not.
That's right, yeah. So, a glorified fact checker, or intensive fact checker.
Well, no. Absolutely critical. It's the sort of role that used to be done by the media of this country, but doesn't appear to be done anymore.
Yeah, I haven't been paid to shut up, so here I am.
Yeah, good luck on that. You went to Victoria University. They never shut up, those people. Now, just quick. Okay, so you attempted to write Racism, Colonialism, and Maori Health, a review of the evidence. What tempted you to get into this area?
Just accidentally stumbled on the Waitangi Tribunal report. It was just in the media, so I thought I'd just have a look at it. But about 20 years ago, I used to read quite a few Waitangi Tribunal reports, and I had read the one on the Napier Hospital report, and that had a completely different view to what the Waitangi Tribunal was now saying. Right. And I put that in my report. So
the Napier Health, just to give a bit of background here, the Napier Health, I was a member of Parliament there for a wee while, but the Napier Health one was due to close the hospital at Napier, and they transferred the health services to a regional hospital based in Hastings. It was very unpopular in Napier at the time. And was that tribunal decision about Napier Hospital about the disposal of the assets and the land, was it?
Mostly it was about there was a claim that there was a promise that there would be a hospital for Napier, and the tribunal found that no, that wasn't really a promise, and that the logical thing had to be, you couldn't have two hospitals, you'd have to have one, and Hastings, went to Hastings, which was on the criteria assessed was basically advantageous to more Maori than it was disadvantageous.
Right, okay.
But part of that, there was claims that, Maori health needs were not being met under the treaty in general, as evidenced by poorer life expectancies, etc.
Right. And so there is now a prevailing narrative, as you know, not just in the health sector, not just in the Waitangi Tribunal, but throughout the public sector in general in this country, including local government, that Maori suffer disproportionately because of the continued effects of institutional racism as a result of colonialism and the like. you've examined those particular claims against health, that ideology that racism, institutional racism, and the deleterious effects of colonialism have affected Maori health outcomes. You've looked at it. What does the evidence suggest to you?
Well, it's not true. That substantially, well, if you just look at the reports, like take racism, instances of actual Maori experience racism in the health system over their lifetime is 4%. So what you've really got, what people are relying on is mostly the health or the life expectancy data, and they say there's a 7 years difference, hence it follows that it must have been racism. So what you get is a circular argument. The other one is inequitable, unfair and unjust, and that goes around in a circle, basically. Why is it unfair or unjust? Well, there's a disparity in life expectancy. What does the disparity in life expectancy mean? Oh, it's unfair and unjust. It never gets much beyond that.
Right. So you've looked at what's happened. I think is that a lot of people have. I mean, good God, statistics would have been your life as an economist, and looking at the evidence that they produced. Well, I only did Economics 101, so I was taught the difference between correlative and causative. So in other words, sometimes. Yeah. And what you're suggesting is that correlative statistics are being used to create a causative narrative. Is that right?
Well, that's part of it, but the main part is that we pretty much know what's causing the difference in life expectancy. It's disparate incidence of smoking and differences in obesity and some risk-taking. Like men as a group have a lower life expectancy of women, and one of the reasons for that is they take more risks, and Maori take more risks on average than other people. So these things add up. So most of the observed difference is due to those factors, not racism or they would then say actually the reason why people smoke is institutional racism or colonialism. And, well, you can always make that causative argument back 150 years that if it wasn't for colonialism, we wouldn't smoke. But, it's not something I find to be
Well, you wouldn't
credible.
use a dishwasher or drive a car either, if that's the argument.
Yeah, that's right. And Maori smoking rates have come down quite dramatically.
They have.
They stuck there for a while, because smoking is just not addictive. It's a social activity. So if all your friends and family smoke, you're more likely to smoke. But once that is cracked, that number has come down, and it's basically the health ministry's policy of to impoverish the smokers. So it's a response to price and also to vaping. Vaping has become the thing rather than smoking. But that drop in smoking will take some years to feed through into life expectancy data. It just doesn't miraculously happen. And that's what the 2000 Waitangi tribunals said. Look, the state can't protect you from everything, including what you do to yourself. And even if you all gave up smoking tomorrow, it's going to take, a long time before the data gets better.
So that concept of individual responsibility that you were just saying out of the Waitangi Tribunal, you're responsible for your own health, the choices you make, now has somehow morphed into, well, you would be if it wasn't for institutional racism and the effects of colonialism that you're experiencing as some form of post-traumatic stress syndrome, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's the argument that's now being used.
That if they could articulate it, but they never, it never gets to any kind of detailed level. Not really.
All right. So this argument went from being individual responsibility of Waitangi Tribunal to 2 years ago, this report into Maori health outcomes. What did that suggest, Ian?
Well,
what was the change in philosophy, if you like?
Well, the change in philosophy is a change in philosophy. It's it's the anti-colonial racism is responsible for anything mindset. And so once you have that mindset, it's all obvious to you. But when you track back and say, well, either you believe that it's responsible for everything, or you just look at the data, which it suggests not.
Can I ask the obvious question? So if I'm white, so if I'm a Pākehā New Zealander, and I'm living the same lifestyle as, I don't know, my same socioeconomic Maori chap who's living next door and his family, are our health outcomes likely to be predictably the same? I smoke, he smokes.
That's probably a tough one. Is there an ethnic element to life expectancy?
Yeah.
Quite apart from your behaviour?
Yeah.
I don't think anyone knows the answer to that.
Well,
that might be something, it's just like you're a male, you're going to live shorter than a female. Some of those reasons are due to male behaviours, and some may be, just the genetic susceptibilities. So we don't know if Maori have a lower life expectancy in part because, their genetics are just not lined up, well.
Well, I mean, that's possible. There is some particular, I can't remember, you will know better than I, Ian, there is some particular, is it hepatitis or something like that? There is some particular genetic deficiency or reaction to a particular stimuli that Maori have to a greater extent than Europeans by comparison. It's well documented. I can't remember what it is now, but they've been...
Yeah.
Okay, so you're suggesting it may, but it would, over the course of things, it wouldn't make a huge amount of difference, I wouldn't imagine, given the numbers.
Probably not.
No.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so you've published this paper. It's 55 pages. I can go and see the whole page on, is it tailrisk.co.nz?
It's not put up there yet, so it's basically in circulation. We have trouble with our provider and putting new stuff on, so trying to sort that out.
Well, it is unfortunate because I think it's available on Kiwi blog, for example, David Farah's blog, in Toto.
Yep.
Yeah, all right. So
people could go there and get it in the interim.
Right. Now, you're also suggesting, though, that Waitangi Tribunal didn't do its job properly. They didn't seriously review Maori health developments over 2000 to 2020. They largely focused on life expectancy outcomes rather than look at any of the health impacts upon the population in general. Have I got that right?
Yeah, that seems to be right. If you read the report... there's very little there. They really just say, well, in 2000 it was bad, and just shied away from a detailed look at how the by-Maori, for-Maori health system was working. So you just don't see a sustained look at it.
Well, now, it's interesting you should say that, because you also make the point that the by-Maori, for-Maori primary healthcare model hasn't been properly analysed either by the Waitangi Tribunal or anywhere else to see whether or not the outcomes improve under that via the public health system, yes?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to Laurie Knight's paper, I just referenced that, and I think he was saying that the tribunal got a lot of material, but they didn't want to release it and talk about it.
Yes, because yesterday, I'll talk about it a little bit later on, but this by-Maori, for-Maori philosophy is very strong in terms of the delivery of public services at the moment. You would think as a basic that you'd actually try and prove that it worked before you change the system of delivery, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And you're saying that there is no proof, certainly in the health sector, or certainly considered by the Waitangi Tribunal, that it does.
Well, I was actually taking the bent. We were told in that report, that there's a lot of academic support for impacts of racism on health outcomes, and Ashley Bloomfield was, said they'd had lots of data on it, and lots of studies supporting that concept. So most of my report was, okay, you've got all these studies, I'm going to look at them. And mostly I found that they didn't come to much. And it was kind of like strained every muscle to take a negative view on a different outcome where there might be alternative or plausible reasons for different outcomes. And particularly I think the New Zealand Medical Council, they abused the information that was available to exaggerate the effects, and that was on a fairly important one of the death rates after operations.
Mm-hmm.
And they selected a model which took out a lot of stuff which offset that, because when you do a model, there are other things going on, so you want to adjust for those. They used a model that just adjusted for age and left out all the other factors that explained the outcomes other than possible racism, and that collapsed the difference between the two. So that was close to kind of a scientific fraud.
So you're suggesting that public health bodies and bodies like the New Zealand Medical Council are manipulating information, publicly available information, obviously in most cases, to predetermine an ideological outcome?
Well, certainly there's a pretty strong bias in the mindset and evaluations. I mean, you read the whole paper, is that right?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, and you would have seen that bit on the New Zealand Medical Council. Mm. Yeah, they were claiming the impact was about 50%. The actual full model was 14%, and at 14% differences, you're really going, well, you haven't adjusted explicitly for obesity and smoking outcomes. Data is always fuzzy. The 14%, maybe it's there, maybe it's not.
Right. But at the end of the day, your argument is that the way in which they've done the survey predetermines the outcome.
Well, they selected something that was advantageous to their narrative.
Yeah.
They didn't actually reference their data, so I found it. So not referencing your data is the first no-no, and then selectively picking from it to exaggerate the actual effect is another one.
Yes. So have you personally, you published this, a couple of months ago, June, I think it was, is that right?
It's not long ago, yeah.
Yeah.
It's only been circulating a couple of weeks. It was because we couldn't get the damn thing up on site.
Mainstream media pretty much ignored you?
Yep. But I used to get a lot of attention because I started off I like to declare myself I'm not an academic. I'd say I'd be more of a public intellectual now. That's, gilding the lily. But I've written quite extensively on complex issues of public import. So often people come to me and say, can you have a look at this discussion document now of this or that ministry, and I'll have a close look at it. Mostly it's done for free. Occasionally I do work for worthy causes where they do pay me something, but mostly it's a freebie.
Right. All right. Thank you very much.
This one was.
Good on you. Thank you very much, Ian, and thank you for sharing the information. It contributes to the debate, and anything that challenges the orthodoxy is a good thing. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay.
All right, that is Ian Harrison. You can go to his website, which is tailrisk.co.nz. If you want to read the whole report, it's 55 pages. It's a very easy read, by the way. It's not a hard read. You can go to David Farah's blog, kiwiblog, I think it is, .co.nz, and you can download it from there. All right? It is on other blogs as well as throughout that. But, there is no question, and I see it as an elected member of a local government organisation, but there is no question that there is an ideological narrative that has come through, particularly in the last 3 years. And I do suggest to you that it's become mainstream primarily because Winston Peters was no longer part of that government. Whatever your views on Peters and New Zealand First, they were the brake. And once they weren't there again, the brake was let off. Bang, off it went. And so now the public sector very strong on running this, what we would call woke ideological narrative, that the plight of all Maori, irrespective of whether they end up in the justice system, in our schools, or in our health services, is predetermined by the racist and colonialist past of this country. And the really sad part of that is that next year, that narrative is going to be a part of the indoctrination that every school student will receive in this country through the new New Zealand history curriculum. I mean, I am an historian. That's what I trained at university. That's what I've researched in my postgraduate career as well. And I am shamed and shocked, stupefied and amazed that we have got people with a severe and biased ideological perspective reinterpreting history, our own history of our own country, to fit that ideology, and that they are using the education system to do so. History is about trying to discover the truth. It's as noble in its purpose as science, the uncovering of truth, the unraveling of why we think how we do, what we've done, why we've arrived at this particular position. But it doesn't seek to judge, because we all realise that in every generation, I can take you back one, take you back two, take you back three. Every generation has a different political and social perspective. History teaches that instantly. And the idea that you can head back into the 19th century and say, you fail my 2023 woke values, is appalling. The other thing about the history curriculum, for those of you who are about to suffer it, and your children will be, mine will be, good God. No, they will and they won't. I won't go into that now. But the other thing to tell you about that ideology, or that new history curriculum, it only goes back to 1840. So all the stuff that happens before 1840, so all the history, human history, that happened in New Zealand from 1250 AD roughly through to 1840, so that's 600 years of history, will not be covered by it. Now you just think about that for a moment. Humans have lived in New Zealand since roughly 1250 AD. That's what the archaeological evidence shows us. And there's solid empirical evidence available from both Maori and from European sources to teach a really good pre-1840 history. And certainly the earliest interactions between Europeans and Maori, what I would have thought, and between Maori and Maori, would have been critical to understanding why we're where we are. The idea that you can suddenly start at 1840 and say, right, compounds not only the concept of historical truth and accuracy, but it is also being utilised to run a particularly ideological narrative, and a narrative that at the end of the day discredits history by not searching for truth, but for searching for facts that pinpoint or support a particular 2023 narrative and ideology. And I think we would all concede that is wrong.